All right, everyone. Thank you for joining our Walpole Webinar series, our free Sage 100 training. In this session today, we are going to cover version 2020 of Sage 100 Cloud. I'm going to put everyone in listen-only mode. We will take questions via the chat. It will be a little more interactive in this session than we have been with the other trainings, because we do want to introduce this new version. We do have an hour allotted for this, so we will take questions at the end. If you do have questions throughout, go ahead and raise it in the chat. And as we kind of go through each group of new features, we'll unmute everyone and ask for questions. This session is being recorded, and a copy of the recording will be sent to you. So Cole Straub is our consultant that's prepared this presentation for you. So Cole, go ahead and take it away.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm sure the majority of us are all working from home, so that's always fun. What I want to show you is some of the new features of 2020. There are a lot of new features. Some are important for very small groups. Some are huge global changes that we think benefit a lot of people. And some are some things we want to make sure you're aware of. So like Linda said, we've got an hour allotted. We very likely won't take up all of that, but that just leaves more time for questions. And obviously, if you see something here you want specific, drilled down detail on, we can always touch after the presentation. So Sage 100 2020, there are some great new improvements, and combine this with some of the improvements in Sage 100 2019 if you're not already on there. There is a lot of streamlining and sort of overall improvements for manufacturing, for sales orders and shipping, and for purchase order management. And one of the big features that they've rolled out to this is e-invoicing, and we'll sort of touch base on all of these. So I'm going to start with sort of a top-down approach and just kind of walk you through some of the newer stuff. And we can go from there, and I promise we'll get to all the goodies with very specific detail. So in general, they've realized that the name and address and international stuff needed to be expanded and improved. So you now have a much more robust international address function. So country codes now have a priority over certain things. They've got an understanding that not every country just has a state. So now you'll see nomenclature for state and province, and that boils down to zip code maintenance, now called postal code maintenance. There's a much more understanding that lots of companies ship international, and we need long addresses and long things. So one of the things you can look at in country code maintenance is we now have, the much larger things with all the different names, and then same thing for zip code, postal code maintenance. Now you'll see that it's related to the country code first and foremost, and then there's state provinces and things like that. This boils down through everything else in the system for customers, for vendors, so all that has an expansive right. Now in 2017, they expanded the vendor information fields to allow for much larger names. Obviously, when a lot of manufacturing comes from offshore, we have very long and specific names that need to be listed on both checks and invoices and things like that. This particular company at this particular road in this particular province is not an uncommon thing to have to put down for proper function for just banking and other things like that. So what they've done in 2020 is they've done the same function with customer names. You still have the customer limit. So let's do something. Cole's Magnificent Widget Shop of Akron, Ohio, DBA, Cole. You've got 50 characters for the names. The address lines have been increased tremendously. So you've got customer name, the customer contact name. So no longer will you have to do something like, Cole's Mag Widge Shop. You won't have to abbreviate or do those type of things. They've got the expanded fields for you to use. So vendor contact name, customer contact name, customer names, confirmed to names, requested by names. I don't know how many people use those, but it's an excellent one for who the contact is on the individual thing. So they were previously 30 for those, and now they're up to 50. And this was actually something that was requested by the community. And just in case you guys don't understand, Sage does listen to the community. So if you submit your idea through their link, and we'll send that out after as part of this, they honestly do take those into consideration and work as best they can with enough sort of support from customers. They'll try and make those changes as long as it fits with their programming and, won't break the bank to do that. So address lines, they've gone from 30 to 40 characters. From cities have gone from 20 to 30. And again, country name from 30 to 50 for the country names for the setups. That's for, well, at least for internationals and things like that as we consider it. But obviously, if you have a long state or a long city name, you're there. Now, one of the things I also wanted to show in regards to customer maintenance is the mapping feature. Now, I don't know if, I'll just cancel this silly thing. We'll just go to somebody real, well, fake real from our test company. We get this a lot. You'd be surprised where the address given by the customer and the address as you understand it is not the same address that UPS or FedEx or your shipping department sees it as due to just the way it's interpreted on a map. So the zip code says Alexandria, Virginia, but really it's, you know, this different little suburb town that technically has its own name, or, you know, vice versa. It's if you send mail, it's this. If you want to ship, it's actually the bigger city name because that's how everything else understands it. So Sage does have a mapping feature. And with this mapping feature, it's not new. It should be in your current systems for most of you that are on 100C on, I believe, 14 and later. But one thing they've added for this is the option to use your preferred carrier with 100C. So I'm a Google guy myself, so I've set it up for Google. So I click it, and this is how I can validate it, and then I'll see, you know, kind of where this sits, and if it represents a different name, it'll, you know, Google will tell me. That's why I like Google. It was off this option. But if I wanted to, I could come to my particular preference in Library Master, user maintenance. I'll go pick me. And in preferences, I could say Google Maps, Bing Maps, or MapQuest, if you're feeling nostalgic. So whatever your preference is, whatever your familiarity is, you can set that to be your default for your map selections. So you've got that map services. Again, it's not a game changer, but it does allow familiarity, and it does help when it runs down to certain things. And again, if you've got a preferred one between the major three, you can go ahead and certainly do it. One thing I think is important is they've expanded, and this doesn't apply to just customers, but I'm going to use customers as my example here, is they've added the ability to export the list box, or the ALE as we like to call it at Walpole, the advanced lookup engine stuff, for a much broader area. So before it was very limited to certain things, and for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, we're going to do it right now. So I'm going to pull up customer maintenance. I'm going to click there, and I'm going to pull my lookup. So these lookups can, if you have the right permission in Library Master, and I can show you how to do that, is say this is the list I wanted to see. I can simply hit the Export to Excel button, and now I've got some real-time data in Excel that I can now manipulate in Excel, you know, sort by criteria and fields and things like that. So GL accounts, customer listing, vendor listing, all those kind of stuff for the basics. Now what we have is the option to get rid of that guy. We have the option in a lot more places. So invoice data entry, basically almost anywhere there's a list box, there's now this option too. And for those that manage their data very tightly, understand that this function can simply be taken away user by user, role by role, and then that box simply is grayed out. I wouldn't be able to export it as such. Now, this is not new. This is all new to 2020 with the expansion of options and list boxes. But this is one of the things that I always like to remind any customer I work with when we look for this kind of data is, don't forget that you can customize these lookups yourself and make it useful to you. So for instance, if I want to create a new view, and we'll call it Cole's view. Again, this is something I'm making for me. Is this my default view, or is this my normal view? And then I can do the important things, like I don't need the sort field unless I use my sort field, which might be a customer rating or a location group or something like that. But all I really want to know is the customer name, the status, and I really need to know that when was their last active date, you know, what was their the last aging when they were there, and this is some of the e-invoicing stuff, and then what their credit limit is. So I can see what my customers are doing and surviving, and can I extend them credit in this crazy time. So now I have this view, and I can sort criteria and specific lookups, and then I can also change how, you know, I don't search by number, I search by name, and I want name contains and not any of that. So if I hit finish here, now I can check my goals view, and then now you'll notice if I export, it's only the columns in the view. So you can customize views that also make it useful for your exported data. So here's the last time these guys had last activity in 2025 because they're from the future. And you can use this to really get into some data without having to be too necessarily, Excel savvy or anything like that. So anywhere you see a lookup, invoice history inquiry, all those type of things, you can take advantage of this. Customize the view, create yourself an export. That'll really get you where you need to go off the bat, and then you can get into your Excel wizardry. All right, so customer views have been expanded, names, addresses, country codes, and that also applies to vendor contact stuff. We've got that increased Excel lookup function in a lot more places for list boxes and things like that. And then really quickly, in Library Master, in role maintenance, for those that have access to it, take a role. There is a security event you can trigger to show, allow user to export to Excel. And I'll send you guys the direct link location to that. All right, so while we're talking about improvements for accounts receivable, I'm going to talk about something that's applicable to both accounts payable and accounts receivable. In California specifically, we have the California Consumer Protection Act. And what that means is for companies that hold information, if the client so wants, you need to be able to prove that you are not keeping any of their what we call PII or personally identifiable information. So what it means is that you can encrypt these things via the system so that your staff can't see them, they won't be read out, they won't show up on reports. Now, this doesn't delete the data. What this does is it gives you an ability to hide them. So if I come to accounts payable, and I'll grab a vendor here. So one of the things we can do in the additional tab is you'll have an option to encrypt. Now, what has to happen is to prevent people from accidentally encrypting active customers is they need to be set in an inactive status. So I can pick a reason. So I'm going to say okay to this. Inactive and the details. So I'm going to say they've got things open so these guys won't. But if I wanted to make them inactive, let's see here. I'll just make somebody new. And then, do I want to encrypt this? I can say yes, and I'll give you the date I encrypted it upon. And what this would do is this would obscure all of my address information, all of my zip code information, anything that can be used to identify me. That doesn't delete invoice history from your system. It won't prevent the vendor from being summed up on reporting or 1099 reporting or any kind of purchase reporting. All it does is it makes you compliant with the act here in California that allows you to encrypt it and hide it. Now, if I need to unencrypt it, all that needs to realize this happen is I need to change it back to active or temporary, and then it will decrypt the data there. Now, this is obviously for compliance for California, but I imagine as other states take this on, it'll be useful sort of nationally and globally. I know Europe is the same kind of process in regards to those things. So if you need to be compliant with that as we move forward, 2020 is the only version that currently offers that function. Now that'll be the same for accounts receivable. You'll be able to inactivate. And again, that active status requirement is because there is prevents you from accidentally just sort of blanket decrypting people or encrypting people in that manner. So you've got to change their status. And then for those that use reason codes, you'll have to select an inactive reason codes to say, okay, this customer is no longer active, and then no one will decrypt that. So totally usable, but the normal stage logic takes over. If they're inactive, you wouldn't be able to issue new purchase orders or AP expense invoices or anything like that for an active customer. That's the point of setting them inactive. So AR and AP have the option to encrypt and decrypt. And so again, you're not losing any data, you're just obfuscating it to be compliant with the act. So while very useful, that's not the best new improvement for AP. The best new improvement for AP is the ability to reverse a check run in its entirety. Doing support for Walpole for a number of years, I can tell you it is not uncommon, so don't feel bad if you're the one that's done this. But there are times where as we fly through our work during the day and we cut a check run for invoice payment selection, we might select 20 or 5 or 10 or have clients with 150 checks at a time. and you've realized that you've forgotten to check the date and you've accidentally posted it to the next period, or maybe you're a very, very specific company and you were sort of due on those dates as it applies to bank rec. So normally it's a 1 by 1 by 1 by 1 reversal. What you can do in the new version is you can reverse an entire check run. So I can dictate it by bank code and check number, and this doesn't have to be a check number or all the check numbers. I just need to have one check number. So if I know the bank code and I know a check number, let's pick this one. This is every check that was in this process. Now, for the ones that haven't been created in the system, this is historical data, you'll notice it says it's an invalid detail. We can't do it. But for anything you've done in the new system when you do it, you'll be able to. The other option, if I don't know my check numbers, I mean, we all would know the bank code, you can go by the source and journal register number. So for those that save it or those that track it in paperless office, I can pull up a source journal register number and just simply say, give me this source journal register and every check that was part of it, and then go from there. So, you know, CD1 and doesn't exist. But if we look at one that was already there, so the register number, well, we can track, grab, and then pull it up that way and select it that way. Once there, it'll tell you the number of checks that can be reversed or valid. So for, again, this being historical data, it won't let me do it, and it'll tell me that. None of these checks will be reversed. 20 of these cannot be reversed. 1 was already reversed, and 19 have an invalid line detail. Now, the only caveat to using this tool, besides from the permission in your role to allow for it, is that your retention settings for AP need to be set up. So in accounts payable options, for history, we need to track invoice payments and retain line comments. We need to have this history to be able to then reverse those lines against it. Once those are there, then it just simply functions as is. So again, you can dump the whole check run backwards, very quickly fixed, and it'll process it for you, and you'll see it on the register as normal and function there. The other AP improvement is going to be the IRS has instituted a non-employee compensation for 2020 tax year. So you should, contact your CPA or accountant or whoever you work with to determine which vendors or which instances you should be doing that. But essentially, it's the 1099 NEC code, and that's now available for accounts payable. So that's in vendor maintenance. You can select that as the default form code. The 1099 payment history window, you can filter by that field. AP invoice data entry, while you're doing it, you can, let's grab something here. And then you can set them up with the selection and go against that 1099 if they're associated there. So you can always pick and change it if their particular 1099 form used to be the NEC. So there's changes to box 9, box 7 for, I think it's called like payer-made direct sales of 5,000 or more. But there are instructions on the IRS Gov website, and we can send you that link too. Okay, so those are the two big changes for accounts payable. We've got the complete reverse check run, we've got the encryption, and then obviously the expanded name fields, et cetera. Does anybody have any questions or specific things on the AP side of it only? You can chat Melinda or Slack it. Sorry, you can do the chat for the join.me and she'll pop it up on my desktop here.
And everyone is unmuted, so if anyone has questions, feel free to speak up. Are there any questions right now about anything that Cole has covered thus far? No, Cole, looks like
all right. Okay, I'll move forward. The one other thing I'll show you in AP that's not really a functional thing, it just is a logical change that a lot of people ask for, is the In, sorry, where are we at here? That'll be a way to retain the invoices for the system is now in months. You don't have to say 999 days. You can say, I want this to be 3 months. And then I can also say, do I want to remove paid invoices during year-end processing or period-end processing if you're somebody that dumps them in and out. But now you can do from 0 to 9,999 months. So obviously that's pretty much through all time of the company. But you have this option now. It makes more sense. They're just trying to clean up everything in the same kind of manner. Okay. Moving right along. Accounts receivable. You can now do the same thing with the encryption. So again, we would do the same thing, accounts receivable, customer maintenance. We'll grab somebody. If they're inactive, we'll see the checkbox. And again, same thing. So I can, let's see this in a real example. 70 Santa Felicia. All right, and all right. So here's myself. Here's my information. It's going to encrypt my information, the data I was encrypted upon, and now you'll notice I've got no more information. So now I can make myself active again, save my changes, unencrypt my stuff, and all my stuff's back. So that's for that. So AP/AR, the encryption for the compliance, and accounts receivable, same thing. I can do retained services by month. And then let's get into the best part of accounts receivable change is the e-invoicing. So for e-invoicing, it's very similar to credit card processing or ACH processing in the current system. So if you don't know, again, this is not the new 2020 feature, but I just want to touch on it. In your payment types for accounts receivable and in the company, you can actually take a credit card via the Paya Connect desktop. So you can do credit card processing through Paya. Used to be called Sage Exchange. And you can also do ACH payments from your customers in that same processor. So you can set up certain connections with their certain account numbers, the processing type, and then suck in an ACH from them directly with approval. Now, what's new is the ability to essentially what's called e-invoicing, and this is where the Sage Payment Portal, and this does require a Paya account, a merchant account as it's called. So you have to sign up for that and be 100C. But what it allows you to do is to set up invoices just like you normally would for either accounts receivable or sales order invoice data entry. Just like normal, I process a batch, and upon successful update of the sales journal, it actually sends a note over to Paya, who then takes that invoice and sends it to your customer with a link for them to pay. So they're essentially going to an online payment portal, and they can click the link to pay it. You can do multiple invoices at once. So if it's, the end of the month and it's 5 invoices for $200 each, you can send them one bill for $1,000 via the Paya customer portal. And that's not done in Sage. For the grouping, that's done in the Paya website. That's what your virtual merchant website is what it's normally called. So to set that up, again, you need 100C, and you'll need the Paya Connect desktop with a merchant account processed. So in your accounts receivables setup, you'll have a payment type maintenance, and you'll know you set it up correctly. So you'll have a valid virtual terminal ID, and it'll say this is a valid connection, meaning it can successfully communicate along with the Paya Connect desktop running. And then it's a matter of coming to company maintenance, because you can specify this for individual companies for those that have many, as well as those that have test companies that don't want to bother setting up a bunch of stuff. So we can come to our company. In payments, we can set to receive both credit cards and ACH. electronic payments, and then right here you'll see this enable payments for e-invoices. So with this enabled, you can then either use a global field change, which is just a common standard tool that Sage exists now. I want to update everywhere where the address is equal to X type of a thing, or customer by customer. We can just go to customer maintenance, and on the additional tab, look at me, there'll be a little checkbox right here. So our account is obviously not an active account, but I'll show it to you here. Some fancy screen work, and you can see right here, there'll just be a small checkbox that says e-invoice payments. So when you select this, this will be defaulted for that customer that they're an e-invoice type of person, and then obviously there's some setup on the Paya end. They can, again, update time of sales journal and send a link, or you can go to the customer portal, as they're going to call it, the consumer portal, and join several invoices and send one link to pay. The idea being is that it's easier for your clients to just simply process. You don't need to set up or own a direct website to take orders via the web, to get payments via the web. It's meant to speed, obviously, receivables and ease of access for your customers. Now, you obviously have all these files that would then be via the Paya portal, and we want to record them via a cash receipt. Now, in cash receipt entry, you'll also have on your cash receipts batch in the deposit screen the ability to select that, hey, this cash deposit is actually all going to be from my Paya desktop. And again, I'll go ahead and show you this. So you'll see that there's actually an e-invoice payments button to select, link the payments from the invoice, and this will actually automatically import all the data records and associated invoices into the cash receipts for you. So you'll have the ability to just basically say, I'm going to do my e-invoice clearing, and then dump all those into Sage cash receipts entry via an automated process. So it's new. There's a couple of features that are really, really cool about it, aside from the ease of access, but being able to group all your invoices, being able to send the invoice with the link out. There's quite a few different options, and as that becomes more available with documentation and other things, I'm sure we'll put on something specific to it. But basically, you'll need a merchant account, and they'll give us an API key for us to set up the communication between your invoice payment account and Sage. And then you'll be able to just simply, hey, this guy wants e-invoice payments, and then every time you update a sales register and he's part of it, he'll get that invoice link to go ahead and pay those. I want to take a moment and go ahead and stop and answer some questions on that. I'm sure a lot of people signed up to see that. I know we don't have all the bells and whistles lined out in our demo boxes, but I can answer some sort of on-the-fly questions about it, about applications and things. If anybody has any. All right. Okay. Moving on, if you have questions, please follow up with Melinda or myself. But that function is available in 2020 immediately. And then again, it's just a matter of signing up with a Paya merchant account. And then they'll do all the processing. So another cool improvement that so you guys can understand it is there are some improvements to custom office. I know most of our customers have us do all their custom office work, but for those that do manage your own custom office, there's two key improvements. One is they make it a little more understandable for people that aren't savvy on the back end to correct and update the lines and grid detail. So to give you an example of that, I'm going to come to invoice data entry, grab a batch, make an invoice. Yeah, okay. I'll grab a customer and to the lines. So if I wanted to update this normally, so I'm going to update this invoice data entry screen for everybody. Getting to the line detail was originally sort of an odd little box with having to understand and select specific records and tables. And now if I want to customize it, it gives me a visual display of the grid so I can understand that, hey, I'm adding a particular field and I want to add, this field, this item, this all. So I want to add the invoice type to this box. Or I want to add the extended description key, as a reference against it. Maybe that means something to me for somewhere else. So now you can see a visual display so you can understand where it's being added, what it looks like, all of that prior to making changes or linking tables or doing things like that. So that's one big improvement. And the other big improvement is if you do have Walpole do work for you doing customizations with UDFs and scripting where we need UDFs or user-defined tables, we no longer have to interrupt the business and kick everybody out to do it during business hours. One of the functions we can utilize is that if you want us to make UDFs and fields and such, we can design them, we can change them, we can edit them, and then we can save them without updating the tables, because if the table is in use, we can't update it with somebody in there. So instead of interrupting and kicking everybody out early for the day or trying to squeeze things in on the lunch hour to make the changes quickly as possible without being interrupted, we can set it all up, save it, and then schedule a task in Sage to update that after hours or after a specified time. And that way we can do it in the evening when no one's in the system, or during your downtime first thing in the morning, or whatever it is. So now we've got much more flexibility in how we can help and how we can help customize your system without truly having to sort of bother you to do it. And while that is an entirely new feature, including the ability to schedule it, scheduling in general is not a new feature to 2020. That's been around for a couple of versions, and I'll just touch on that briefly to make sure everybody's aware. So if I want to build a job name, so this is Library Master Task Scheduler, stuff. So what type of job is this? Is this a daily job? Do I run this weekly, monthly? Am I just going to run this once? What user, what their Sage password login is? No, it's not 1, 2, 3, 4, just in case you think it is. Or at least it won't be anymore. And then, am I doing journal and registers? Am I doing reports? Am I doing visual integrators or others? So I can certainly run a report from SO, and I want to run the open sales order report, and this report setting and print to a particular printer, so PDF stored, so you can use something like PDF Director to save it automatically, or you can set up certain things. And then with email setup, you can trigger it to email that report as well into the paperless office as if it was sending something. So you can schedule and set your own stuff up and have it repeating on certain tasks and schedules. And we would utilize the same kind of thing to update your UDFs, etc. This is the same way we process sort of updating your index of quick searches for 2019 and later. So you can rebuild the search index to make global search much more effective, and we schedule that nightly with that kind of a job. Okay, so that's the biggest stuff for Custom Office, again, mostly for us. The last thing I'll show you in Custom Office is, I'm going to go ahead and make a fake field here really quick. And I haven't quite pinned out which of our customers will use this the most, but one thing you can think of is, let's go ahead and we'll update a very particular vendor detail or something. So I'm just going to go to AP Vendor Master. And I'm going to add a field. And we'll call this sort of something. So one of the things we can do is we can actually mask this information. So I can say this needs to be a string, and it can be up to 15 characters, but I also want to mask the display. So now when I make a mask, it's be, so whatever characters you put, gotta have that many masks. And there we go. So now when you enter the field, it'll actually be masked. So they can type it in, but if it's on the screen display or if someone's looking at it after the fact, they wouldn't be able to see it. So something that needs a little bit of security, but is not something that you need to totally lock down. We've had this kind of question about, we want people to be able to enter this, but I don't want everybody to be able to see it. So it's been really hard to, without some custom scripting, to kind of lock down a field that needs to be entered, but not everybody needs to see it. And that's one of the ways we would do it, is we could do that kind of encryption or masking. It's not really encrypted, it's just masking to hide some of the stuff. Okay, so that wraps up Custom Office. Again, if you're unsure what Custom Office can do for you in regards to customizing Sage, that's really where Walpole shines, between scripting and programming and customizations. We can kind of get you what you need, which transitions me to inventory management improvements. This is something we almost always had to script and customize to get to function. And what that is the ability to use expiration dates for lot serial items, those kind of things. That's a new feature for 2020. So in inventory management, we now have the ability to add an expiration date to lot serialized items, things like that, where you normally have let's call it a sort or a filter criteria, and you need the ability to either trigger on that. Now, that's not just for reporting. You can also set this up to restrict sales, inventory usage, returns, issuance. This is really, really good. So set up an inventory management. You'll first have to set it up. Oh, I've got it open because I've got the screen open here. Wait for it. Nope, don't want to save changes. Get out of there. Get out of there. Relaunch it. Okay. So in inventory management options, we have enable lot expiration dates for serial stuff. So I can say it's absolutely required, or I just want you to put it in. So if it's required, obviously that becomes a field that needs to be entered and selected every time, whether that's through transaction entry, receipt of goods, issuance, PO receipts, things like that. So we can calculate these automatically too. So if, for instance, the calculation date is based upon months and it's 14 months, as you see here, if I do a receipt of goods and today is the receipt date, the expiration date will be set for 14 days from the receipt date. Same thing for inventory issuance or inventory receipt or inventory sales. They all fall under these categories. So for issues, I don't care because I'm issuing this out of the system. I don't really want to worry about the receipt dates or the expiration dates. For returns, I'm going to accept anything back unless, it was already expired for, a full year. If it's past the expiration date by a whole year, then we're going to say you've had that way too long regardless, and I'm not going to accept it. So again, depending on your company policy, that would be the most important part there. But each of these is how you can set up and function. So do we use it? And then how do we calculate this automatically? Now, for anything we set for automatic, it can always be overridden manually. That's one of the things they put in, so that way you're not locked in having to adjust out inventory, to adjust inventory back in, to create a new expiration date just because something was miscalculated or entered or you're unfamiliar with setups. So you can always override it, obviously with the right permissions. The same thing with sales. So the sell-by date is based upon a number of years after expiration date is when I can sell it, so I can really restrict it. I can go by months, by days, by, don't calculate ever for sales, just sell it. If I say it's good, it's good. And same thing for as issues or serials. So for sell-by, let's do something like days, and you can do it for up to a week after the expiration date. All right, so in entry, nothing has to change. So now if I come to product lines, I can look and set up standard stuff here in lot serial and say the same thing. So for this particular product line, I can now track or not track, required or don't. So you can see globally I don't, but for this product line I do. And then I don't want you to calculate it all. I want to determine it every time. Or same, for this particular product line, I can be treated differently than the global. And again, for all aspects, issues, sales, or actual function. So you're not stuck with the global. If you've got 90% of your stuff that can be on autopilot, but this particular grouping needs to be specialized, you absolutely can change and configure it here. And then same thing for returns. I'll allow any return up to 3 years past the expiration date because I am that nice. So again, maybe you've set this up and you're thinking everything worked well, but there's a couple of items that need to be addressed. So you can actually come to any item that has it, drill down to it, and there will be a modify button here. Let me grab something that's not serial. There we go. So I can select these, drill down to one that has it, and manually correct the inventory date for this particular lot, or the expiration date, I should say, for this particular lot or on these particular receipts. So you've got the ability to manage them independently, by product line, globally, and then obviously with the right permissions, you can still use your manual oversight to correct or adjust. So again, receipt date, inventory issue date, sale date, all those can automatically trigger the expiration or calculation against those. And then again, that flows down to reporting, to restrictions on what can be sold, what can be returned, when different departments can issue things to each other, et cetera. And I think it's huge because it's been something we've had to manually correct by adding UDFs and then scripting. If UDF date is greater than or equal to this, then pop a message that says, sorry, you're not allowed. So you've got this sort of custom built enhancement that's already in the system standard now. Okay. Questions on expiration. So that, again, that's bill of materials, that's transactions, physical counts, purchase orders with receipt of goods and stuff. All that kind of stuff is present. Okay, moving on. The next thing I'll talk about also applies to purchasing. And before I do that, I want to make sure everybody's aware that in 2019 and late versions of 2018, if you do shipping data entry, you know one of the improvements in product update 4 for 2018 and all of 2019 is that you can consolidate orders to a single shipment. So I can do my shipping invoice for multiple sales orders if it's the same matching criteria based on my first selection. And what they've done is they've realized that, wow, that logic needs to also apply for purchasing. I know many companies that purchase large POs. I know many companies that purchase many small POs from a single vendor as well. So those vendors might consolidate shipments, send them all together, whether that's, we're talking ocean containers or whether we're talking LTL carriers that just happen to have all 4 POs on it at the same time. What they've done is they've now enabled purchase order to allow multiple receipt of goods. So if I want to pull up my standard receipt of goods entry, let's grab a receipt number. Let's do, oh, perfect. Here we go. So I've got my UN1 invoice from United. Again, I'm just doing a receipt of goods at this moment. I don't have to enter an invoice number. But now you'll notice we have this awesome little checkbox, this plus box. So now it'll tell me, hey, for United, you've got all these other ones. Did you want to do any of this? So I'm going to say, yeah, give me this one, and this one. So these 3 orders have to have certain criteria. So because I selected UN1 first, they all have to match the criteria of UN1. So that's the ship via. I can't say one's coming FedEx and one's coming UPS. They need to match. The order warehousing, the sales tax schedule has to be the same. There's like 3 key component fields, and those are, that's the only thing that needs to sort of be the same. So terms code, you can't say this invoice is due in 40 days, but this one's due in 90 days, just in case you do a receipt of invoice. Sales tax schedule, same behavior, and then the shipping code, because again, the ship via needs to be the same for you to tell me it all came together. So I've added all of those. So now you can see I've got widget A, widget B, widget C, and this lovely drawer letter file. Here. So I'm going to go ahead and receive these really quick. So let's get 5 of those, 3 of those. Let's make a new lot today. And we'll grab these guys. And we'll make some new serial numbers. Okay, that's good to me. And we're only going to do 15 minutes. All right. And then we can update this register just like normal. We'll say 2025 because, again, the system's from the future. So you can see the serial numbers, the lot numbers I've created for these groupings. So no thank you to that. Yes, please. And I'll say no to the DTR just for speed. So now if I'm looking at this from a standpoint of receipt history inquiry, so just to show you that. And so you'll now notice that in this G1017 order, it says, hey, you received multiple orders on this, letting you know that you didn't, this person didn't make a mistake. I didn't somehow add multiple invoices or items that didn't exist before. And if I look at these independently, there is a additional information drill down that gives me my normal stuff and can tell me what PO number it belonged to and of the multiples. So I've got A and B, and then the same thing with those drill downs. So there is this inquiry, so my lot, my serials, all stays the same. And then I've also got my list box export. It's the new feature. So it'll tell me what each line's from, where it's about, and we can go, you can track it down that way. So now you get 5 things at once, one single entry for staff to make, all appropriately, all behaving with the same action. So a lot of expirations if you have that for those type of items. You can drill down and find them independently by which one they came from, and it'll always tell you that, hey, this was on the same, receipt access. All right. So that's the new big one for purchase order. Again, multiple receipts on a single, multiple orders on a single receipt, and the same process applies with invoices. The invoice itself would also tell you that. So if we do a receipt of invoice for multiples, you get the one invoice created for all of them to the same vendor, and they'll tell you line by line which PO number it came from, so if I invoice for 5 lines, that's 3 POs. If I look at the invoice detail on the inquiry, it'll show me line 1 was from this PO, line 2 was from the same PO, line 3 was from the new PO, and line 4 was from the third PO. So AP invoice history inquiry, receipt inquiry, all those will sort of show the new linkages and help you drill down and figure out where they're from. Receipt of goods, register, the invoice register, your purchases journal, the receipt history report, the invoice history report, all those will also be updated to display multiple, and then we can track and change those forms to help with that. Okay. Any questions on that? All right. So the last thing I'm happy to announce is that with 2020, they are retiring the classic desktop from the sort of 80s looking desktop that's been available as a classic mode in 2014 and later. But obviously for 2014 and later, you should have this new modern desktop. That's just something I'm quite pleased with. If anybody has any questions about anything in particular that I've covered, or anything on other options or things maybe I've discussed or refreshed you about that's new in 18 or 19 that you needed to see, let me know. We can send something over to you. If not, I encourage you to follow up with the rest of our free training webinars this week. We're just trying to make sure that for those that are running on reduced staff or many people wearing new hats, Dave, I know, is heartbroken about the classic desktop being gone, mostly because his staff is going to harass him to figure out how to put it back. But let us know, follow up on it. We want to do our part to show you what we can, and just help whoever needs help with getting some things done with some free training. It's going to cover the basics. It's going to cover, things you might not be using that you certainly can. I know today is sales order and RMA. I'll be doing that one. And then tomorrow afternoon as well, I'll be doing the paperless office functions about how you can e-invoice, not the new feature, but send out invoices electronically, purchase orders electronically, and those kind of things. If anybody has any questions, now's the time. Well, all right. If you have them and you want to follow up, not in a giant group chat, feel free to email myself or Melinda. I'm sure you have our email addresses. And as a reminder, you can always just email support@Walpole CPA, and that automatically creates a ticket in our system, and we get emailed and alerted so nothing slips between the cracks while everybody's working from home with new mail clients and all that kind of fun stuff. Thank you very much for taking the time. Melinda, go ahead.
And with it being a slow time right now, it might be a good time to upgrade. So if you want to get on the schedule, give us a call. We'll get everything coordinated, start scheduling out our upgrades now that we don't have as many people in the system at the time. So now might be a good time to get that going. So reach out. We'll get everything scheduled, get it coordinated. So thank you so much, Cole, for everything that you've shown today. And like you said, any questions, give us a call. And thank you so much, everyone, for your time.
All right, everybody have a wonderful day, and stay safe, social distance, and we'll all get through this eventually. All right, bye-bye.